Morning everybody. We're back at the sawmill here in the bush, and I'm gonna saw some 2x8s and some 2x4s today. This is pretty much our first snow of the year, and it's kind of a winter wonderland here this morning. I'll have to brush some snow off the sawmill. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna roll some of these logs onto the mill. I've already got one on there to finish up an order of 2x8s. I've got my scraps here, and the shorter ones here, these are 8 feet 2x4, so I'll roll those on and make some 2x4s, and I'll show you how that's done. So for anybody who's new at this, I'll show you how I measure my log and the cuts I make. So right now with this log, I'm going to cut some 2x8s. So that means diameter of 7.5 by 1.5 pieces, and they're 12 feet long. So this is my SMG Champion sawmill, in my opinion, best manually operated sawmill on the market right now. It's Canadian made. It's made out of Quebec, Canada. I've had this going on 7 years. I've sawed quite a bit of lumber with it, and it's never given me any problems. Repairs are easy, parts are easy to get, and it's a 20 horsepower. It's quite a powerful mill. So like I said, in my opinion, best manually operated sawmill on the market. Now there's a whole bunch of sawmills out there, and they're all good. You know, many manufacturers, but I've researched a lot of them, and I bought this one, and I'm really happy with it. So first cut, this is how much it measures. So I've got the blade in about the center of the log to kind of even it out. And if you look on the measurement here, so I just set my blade on the log, and it's at 13 inches, we'll say, give or take. So I try to cut an inch off first cut. The only time I'll cut more than that is if the log's got quite a sweep to it and it's big enough to handle that amount of cut. I might take 1.5 inches off. But for this one, he's pretty straight. I'm going to take 1 inch off first cut, and then second cut I'll give it a quarter turn and cut another inch off. Then I have my square cant, and I start measuring from there. So here we go. So I've made 2 cuts. One cut, the first cut, I took 1 inch off, I turned it a quarter turn, I did another cut. Now I'm at my third cut. Now I have a cant. That means I have 2 straight cuts on the log. It's sitting square on the mill. So from now on, I have to make sure that every cut counts. So as you can see, I'm at 11.25 inches. So the measurement I want to get to is 7.5. That's the diameter of a 2x8. So I can cut inch stock going down to 7.5, or I can cut 1.5 inches. It depends how big it is. Now as you can see, that's the small end of my log. It's not square yet. So I'm gonna have to cut, you know, some slices all around that log to make sure I have a square cant, so I can have a good finished product 2x8 with not too much bark on it, or want to make sure I don't have a whole lot of kerf, which is you know, a rounded edge on that piece of lumber, like it's bark that's left, so they call that kerf. We don't want too much kerf. So I'm at 11.25. So I'm at 11.25. So say I want to take inch boards down to 7 1/8. So you go 7 1/8, 8 5/8, 9 3/4, 10 3/8. So I'll make my first cut at 10 3/8, my next cut at 9 3/8, and so on and so forth. That's taken off an inch each cut, and I have to count 1/8 of an inch for the blade. So a little bit of math, but you know, you get used to it after a while. So to make my first cut, so again, I want to get down to 7 1/8. So 11, I've got quite a bit of space left there. So maybe I can make 11 1/8. No, I can't really. So we'll go boards up to there. So 7 1/2, 8 5/8, 9 3/4, 10 7/8 actually. So we'll make our first cut at maybe 9 3/4. So as you can see, it took a fair amount of a slab off. I made my cut at 9 3/4. So I don't have a big enough diameter on that log to cut 1 1/2 inch stock to get down to that 7 1/2. So I'm gonna do inch, and that's fine. That'll make boards, and I'll trim them up. It'll make 1x6 boards while I'm getting down to my 7 1/2 inch diameter. Now, this next turn is the 4th turn on the log. This will be thickness. So I have preset measurements on the mill, like it's a green line, and those are all 1 1/2 cuts. So I have to start at one of those green lines or an inch before one of those green lines. So as you can see on the end of the log here, you see my straight cuts. So I have a cant. This is my cant here, right here. Now it took quite a bit off of the top of the log, but this is an older spruce log, and it's quite dry, and it's got a little bit of outside rot. The inside is fine, so that's okay. So again, this is my 3rd cut. I'm at 9 3/4. Now my next cut will be thickness, and when I go back around, I'll be back to getting down to that 7 1/2. So my next cut after that will be 8 5/8, and again when I turn it around on that diameter cut, will be down to 7 1/2. Cut it again, and I'll cut it all thicknesses, and it'll be 7 1/2 ready, and those will be all be 2x8s, 1 1/2 by 7 1/2. So there's my 4th cut. I've turned the log now on the sawmill 4 times, and I'm cutting thickness now. Now, as you just saw, I have a preset determined measurement for the thickness of the wood. So I'm doing 1 1/2 thick for these guys. So I'm at 10 1/2 inches, and if I cut a 1/2 inch off, I'll be at my green line, so I can keep cutting those green lines when I'm on that side of the wood. Next time around, remember that next cut will be 8 5/8, and then 180 degrees around that will be 7 1/8, and I can keep cutting those 1 1/2. Now I may get some that have a lot of kerf on them. I'll just, instead of doing that 7 1/2, I'll cut them down to a 2x6, like 5 1/2 or 3 1/2 2x4. But I should get a good 4 2x8s out of this guy. So 4th cut, and we're aiming for that green line, for that thick. So as you can see, each time you turn that log and you cut a piece off, you're squaring up that log. So eventually, with enough cuts, you'll get rid of that kerf and have just a square piece here called a square cant. Then you just slice it up, and that's what makes your 2x8s or your 2x4s or your boards. So that last cut was at 8 5/8. and that made a board. As you can see, I've got it laying right beside there, so I can make my cuts, and it'll trim the edge of that board at the same time. So flip that again, and I'm on the green line there. So I'll take an 1.5 inch piece off, and as you can see, there's still a lot of kerf there. So I probably won't get a 2x8 out of that. I might get a 2x6 or a 2x4. I'll trim that up after. But eventually I'll get to that square cant where I can just cut like 3 or 4 2x8s. And then the rest will be a few boards and a few 2x4s. So I finished cutting that log, and this is what I got out of that log. I started cutting 11 or so inches, so I think it was like 13 inches in diameter. Now remember, that log was a little bit dry rot on the outside, so I took off, you know, a little bit more on each turn. But I got 4 2x8s, 2 2x4s, and 2 1x6 boards, and this is all 12 feet long. Now the 2x4s I'd cut a little bit off. I needed 2x4s. I could have got 2x6. So retail a good, you know, over $100 worth of lumber there. So again, you know, 13-inch diameter log. I started cutting at around 11 3/4, I think, and then that second cut I took another inch off. And that third time you turn that log, that's where you're aiming for the width of your lumber, your dimension. So I wanted 7.5. So I think I started at 9 3/4, and then another 180 degree turn. I cut at 8 5/8, and then 7.5. And then in between those turns, I'm cutting thickness. So right now I got another guy on the mill here. These are all 8-footers. And I'm going to be cutting 2x4s. So this one's pretty big. Again, it's got dry rot on the outside, but the center of that is really white, and that's good lumber. So he's pretty big, I can tell. This guy I'll cut an inch off. I'll turn it. I'll cut an inch off, and then my next cut I'll start cutting now. 2x4s are 1.5 by 3.5. Now this is a pretty big log, so I'm not going to cut down to 3.5. I can double my rows. I'll probably aim for 7 1/8, which is 3.5, 3.5, plus a blade cut in between those rows is 7 1/8. So I'll try to get a cant of 7 1/8 and cut that in half, and then cut my thicknesses. I should be able to get about 8 2x4s, but we'll see how it goes. So one of the things, like, I like this sawmill, SMG Champion. Look them up. Canting the log on the mill is really quick and really simple. I've got two brackets with little wheels on the end that just come up. They hold the log there, and then there's a little pinching thing, and it cants the log. It's really quick, and I'll show you how it works. That's one of the things I really like about this mill. That's it. So let's make things interesting. I'm gonna put these little 8-footers on the mill real time. We'll see how quick we can saw 2x4s. Now if I had a helper, he could throw the slabs over on the pile and stuff, but I'm pretty quick. It's 8 feet long, it's not very long, so not very heavy. So real time, let's see how quick we can do saw up some 2x4s. So about 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes, and I got 5 2x4s and a 1x6, 8 feet long. Now you saw me throw some of those away. They were quite dry rot. That log was pretty bad, but anyway, just shows you how quick this mill is at dogging the log and turning it and rolling it on. You know, I've been doing it for a while, so I'm pretty used to it. But yeah, so about 5 minutes for 5 2x4s and a board, so not too bad. As you can see there, I just broke a blade. Snap right off. Usually when they get to the end of their life there, they'll snap off. So we'll replace it. Keep going.